This is Ask Congress on Congress WTV. It's the web station that seeks to facilitate and expand personal relationships between the viewing Republicans, or the viewing public, I should say, not only Republicans but Democrats as well, and the representatives that they place in power. Today we're privileged to have on our program the distinguished Congressman Luke Messer of Indiana. Congressman Messer is enjoying his first term as a member and was recently elected by his peers as the president of the Republican freshman class. He's currently serving on the House Committee on the Budget, Foreign Affairs, and Education and the Workforce. Congressman Messer, it's great to have you here on the program.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to have the opportunity to be here. Thank you for this platform. It's important to have a chance to, in an unvarnished way, reach out and talk to the public, and I appreciate you having me.
Well, it's very fortunate for us. You're president of the Republican freshman class. How'd that happen?
Well, it was one of those things that happens right after the election. Our election for freshman class president was about 10 days after the election in November. Basically the day after the election, I started making phone calls, calling my colleagues. There are 35 Republicans elected across the country, and my wife said, just like me, to finish one campaign and be ready to go out and go for another one. But there were really a couple reasons I thought that platform was important. One, I believe that we as Republicans, those that believe in my mind in freedom, opportunity, we need to find a better voice and make clear to the voting public that this isn't just about our math homework. This is about real people and real lives, and the policies that I believe in, I believe will give everybody in America a better chance at success. The second thing is that as I talk to people out in my district, they say, man, we're tired of that bickering and fighting in Washington. Can't we do something about it? And so I had an idea that if we reached out to the president of the freshman class, because in total we have more than 80 new freshmen across the country, and just spent some time, break bread, have a cup of coffee, and spend a little time with each other, that maybe we could come together and solve some of our nation's problems. That clearly there are some issues where we're just going to disagree, but on many we can agree, and it's far harder to demonize someone that you know. And so I've reached out to Matt Cartwright, who's the Democrat class president, and we're working together we've done a few things, but we're working together to put together some
That's great, because of the initiative that you're taking. It's something I think that the American people really want to see the members get together in some fashion. I know when I was here, there was an entirely different atmosphere. We not only broke bread together, but strangely enough, as chairman of a committee in Foreign Affairs, I appointed Ben Gilman, who was a Republican, as chairman of two of the subcommittees.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And of course the speaker at that time didn't like me very much for doing that, but it was a good opportunity. There are some issues really that are totally bipartisan, and that can be approached on that basis. Yeah. And that's the one thing that I was impressed by. I followed your Twitter and saw that you made quite a number of followers on the speech that the president made.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, the president, obviously we're taping this just a few days after the president gave his State of the Union speech. I guess if I were to use the Goldilocks standard, of this just too warm, too cold, just right. I thought the inaugural speech, frankly, was more partisan than an inaugural speech would typically be. You think of the Lincoln's second inaugural and talking about how we both pray to the same God, and often those speeches are used as an olive branch. I wouldn't say the president's inaugural speech did that. I heard the president give a speech at the National Prayer Breakfast last week that I thought was tremendous and really an excellent example of the kind of spirit that we need. The State of the Union, listen, it's going to have more details in it, and so therefore there's going to be some policies where we're going to disagree, so I might hold it to a slightly different standard.
Well, certainly the whole question of disagreeing is part of our system, and as long as it is in the best interest of the people.
Yeah, and with civility. And I would say I appreciated the president's focus on jobs. I wouldn't necessarily agree with every element of his path to try to best create jobs. His approach is probably a little bit more government driven than mine might be. I would be more inclined to let the free market work, lower taxes, try to get government out of the way. But I appreciated his focus there. I wish we'd seen a little more focus on spending. You know, elections have consequences, and this president is the president for the next 4 years. And like every American, I want to see this country be successful. And that means if this country is successful for the next 4 years, clearly the president will be successful as a part of that. And my hope was in the State of the Union that now would be the time that he would rally the nation to this spending problem that we have. Almost every actuary that looks at our current entitlement programs concedes that we've got to do something to preserve and protect these programs moving forward. And no matter how much one member of Congress wants to do that, and we're all trying very hard, we need a president that will rally us there. We haven't seen that yet, but you know, hope springs eternal. So we've got a few months.
But I was talking about being impressed. I was impressed with the first bill that you introduced. The one of transparency. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, last week the Congress moved a bill that some would consider kind of wonkish, but I thought was an important bill, the underlying bill that my amendment went into, and it was a bill that talked about the budget horizon. If you've ever seen charts of the budget, they always look like this. Unfortunately, we're always spending more, but we only have a 10-year budget horizon as a nation, and once you get past that 10th year, it's just sort of the ether. It's out into the expanse of the universe. And so the House bill would say that if your budget doesn't balance in 10 years, you have to explain whether it will balance, when, if you do say it will, and then how. Just some general: will you raise taxes? Will you cut spending? What would you do over the horizon? So that was the underlying bill. Well, everywhere I go as somebody campaigning for Congress, and now we've visited 16 of our 19 counties already in my district with public forums in this month. People ask, how much is $1 trillion? You know, boy, that seems like a lot of money. I heard an estimate the other day that if you were to count to 16 trillion, which is what our nation's debt is, it would take you more than 5,000 years to get there if you were counting one number at a time. Well, anyway, our idea was just very simply, if we divided each year's deficit in a budget by the number of taxpayers who were paying, maybe you could break that number down into something that people could understand. It turns out with about $1 trillion deficit, which is what we've run in recent years, hopefully this year will be a little better, but that's what we've run in recent years, and 150 million taxpayers, it's about $6,800 a taxpayer that we're adding to the debt every year, over $13,000 as a couple. And back in the 6th District of Indiana, where I come from,
a lot of money.
That's real money. You know, that's real money. And you know, we were excited that the bill was bipartisanly supported. It was put into the underlying legislation, and now we filed an accompanying bill because I believe that calculation, sure, it should apply to the president's budget, but I'm hopeful as a member of the Budget Committee we can put that same calculation in the House's budget. And you know, here's the deal. I mean, anybody could on a napkin do that kind of calculus, but if the government calculates it, right, then we can all agree that's the number. And so that's my hope.
Well, it's important too that the people understand. For my part, I know that going to my constituents when I was here, they cannot understand this business of trillions of dollars. I mean, this is beyond their comprehension. And therefore, if you bring it home to them, as you're trying to do now, I think it's a much greater appreciation, and I think it will point up the importance of our looking at spending in the way it should be looked at.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you know, what I hear, I think there's an awakening in this country that we have to quit spending more money than we have. Families do that. And, you know, listen, I know the old provision is everybody hates Congress, but they like their congressman. Everybody understands we're spending too much money, but boy, don't come and try to cut my program. But you're finally hearing people nod, or seeing people nod, hearing them speak up and say, yeah, that's right. In my district, at least, I get the sense that people understand it is immoral to continue to pile debt onto the next generation and rob them of their chance to live the American dream.
How do you answer the question of the economy where it is right now? And I know taking the train from New York down here, looking at out the window and seeing all those closed factories that exist here, it's unbelievable how many you see actually derelict structures.
Yeah.
And how do you, however, go back to the other part of it? And if you do cut spending today, any number of people will say, well, you're going to have a decided effect upon the current economy.
Yeah, well, the challenge we're in, the pickle we're in now is both have a negative effect, right? So if we continue to pile up debt and raise the cost of borrowing for private business too, that has its own long-term consequence. Look to nations like Italy and Greece to see what that could mean if you have to have a dramatic drop later because we didn't kind of keep our house in order now. The second is this question of whether you invest. I guess I would say all government investments not the same. You know, in the era of Roosevelt, I was talking to a gentleman at a coffee this last weekend that said, you know, he remembers his father waking up to go to a job to break rocks for roads, part of the Roosevelt era programs, and that's a very different kind of program than paying someone to sit on the couch, for example.
That's right, sure.
And borrowing for investments and assets. So, you know, borrowing for a bridge that's used over multiple generations, well, then makes perfect sense that we pay for that over 2 generations of users if the program works. But when we start borrowing for consumption, which is a lot of what we're doing right now, I mean, that is literally running up a dinner bill on your credit card and then handing it to your grandchild and telling them they're going to have to pay for it. And so I think that's the balance we have to walk. And you know, I'm hopeful we can find some opportunities to work together to get that done.
Congressman, we must go back to our local stations for a moment, so we'll have to have a break here. We'll come back to you right after that.
Super. Thanks.